Welcome to the Eddie Hyatt Podcast. I'm your host and teacher, Eddie Hyatt. So glad to be back with you today as we continue our exciting journey through the book of Acts in this series that we are calling Life Changing Lessons from the book of Acts. And yeah, the example of those earliest believers, they were just as human as we are. They they had the same sorts of aspirations and the desires and challenges that we face today. Yeah, they didn't live in a high tech world that we live in today, but human nature has not changed. So we were started yesterday in Acts 13, and we're going to focus in on number two, on verse 2 today. We're going to talk about the role of prophecy in the New Testament. So let's go ahead and read chapter 13, verses 1 and 2. It says, Now in the church that was at Antioch, there were certain prophets and teachers, Barnabas Barnabas, Simeon, who was called Niger, Lucius of Cyrene, Manaen, who had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch, and Saul. Now, verse 2, we're going to focus on this. It says, As they ministered to the Lord and fasted, the Holy Spirit said, Now separate to me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I have called them. At this time, Paul the Apostle is still being called Saul because he has not yet really entered into the working out the practicalities of his apostolic calling. By the word apostle, the Greek word apostolos, it means a sent one who is sent. So a New Testament apostle is not a church office. It is someone who has received a commission from the risen Lord and has been sent forth by him. And so it says, so this is the beginning of Paul's apostolic ministry. Yes, he had already been called, but now he's going to start walking it out. So let's read that again. As they ministered to the Lord and fasted, we talked about that in the last session. The Holy Spirit said, now the Holy Spirit spoke. How did he speak? Well, he speaks through members of his body. So this would have been a prophetic utterance. It could have been a tongue, an interpretation. And let me define what a New Testament prophecy is. It is an unprepared, spontaneous utterance in the language of the person speaking and those to whom he is speaking. A message, a specific message for that occasion, for that time and place. Normally it's not one that is very long, but the point is it's spontaneous. It's not a prepared sermon. No, it is something that happens. It's initiated by the Holy Spirit. It comes forth unexpectedly, and it is a spontaneous, unprepared utterance of the Holy Spirit through the vessel through whom He chooses. So, someone there in the midst of this time where they are praying, they're worshiping, they're interceding, they're praising God. That is all included in this expression as they ministered to the Lord and fasted. And we talked about this in the last episode that they fasted just meant that they were giving priority to this. They were setting aside some other things that were legitimate in order to give themselves to ministering to the Lord. And in that atmosphere, there was a manifestation of the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit spoke through a prophetic utterance, and tongues with interpretation is prophecy. We read that clearly in Paul's discussion in 1 Corinthians chapter 14. But listen to what the Holy Spirit said. Now separate to me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I have called them. There are two things about this statement that I want to point out. It says, now separate to me. So not separate to a ministry, not separate to a journey, but the separation was to me. Folks, our first calling is always to Jesus Christ. Our first calling is to Him, to minister to Him. to build a relationship with Him, to know Him. Our first calling is to Him, to know Him, and then to people to make Him known. So separate to me Saul and Barnabas for the work to which I have called them. So the Lord had already called them. I interpret this to mean that they already had a sense that God was sending them forth into the Gentile world. And that they had not yet moved out in it. So now here's a manifestation of the Holy Spirit affirming and confirming what they already know in their hearts. And this is a very important point. And I can't make this more clear. I can't emphasize this more. New Testament prophecy is to confirm what you already know. You see, in the Old Testament, oftentimes people would go to a prophet to get direction. You will never find that happening in the book of Acts. You will never find that happening in the New Testament. You will never find in all of Paul's letters, 13 of them to churches, in Peter's 2 letters or in John's 3 letters, you will never find them encouraging people to go find a prophet to hear what God is saying. No, that's Old Covenant, that's Old Testament. No, in the New Testament, we all are given the Holy Spirit, and we have the privilege coming before God for ourselves and worshiping Him and hearing from Him. In the New Testament, the gift of prophecy is for confirming, encouraging, exhorting, and confirming what you already know in your heart. Oh, my friends, so many people have gotten themselves into trouble because somebody prophesied to them and they jump up and run out and thinking that it was from God. But just remember, I would say every time the Bible speaks about the gift of prophecy, it exhorts. It's accompanied by an exhortation to test the spirits, whether they be of God, to judge the prophecy, to evaluate the prophecy. 1 Corinthians 14, I think it's verse 31, says, let the prophet speak and let the others judge. Let the others evaluate and discern what is said. And in 1 Thessalonians, I think it's chapter 5, around verse 17, Paul said, do not despise prophecy. Don't quench the spirit. Despise not prophecies. Test everything. Now, here is a New Testament test. My friends, if somebody prophesies to you and you don't have any sense of that you're supposed to do something, and you don't have any sense of that on the inside, you better ignore it. You better seek God. You better put that in the hands of God. You better put that on the shelf. Yeah, you can say, now, God, is this you speaking to me? I haven't heard anything like that from you. I had a person one time, and I'll close with this little story. Um, he was attending some meetings that I was conducting in Tulsa, Oklahoma years ago. And he called me he was a good fellow, good, sincere fellow. And he said, he said, I was lying down by the pool meditating, and God spoke to me and said, go call Eddie Hyatt and tell him to start a church and call it the Gateway to Heaven. Now, I knew this person was sincere, and he was really wanting to hear from God, but I knew he had not heard from God, because I knew that God was not leading me to start a church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and especially to call it the Gateway to Heaven. So I didn't want to quench his spirit, but I said something like this. I said, Larry, I appreciate you telling me, but I would not do something like this unless God Himself told me to do it. Yes. I wouldn't do something. I would not do that unless God spoke to me Himself to do it. I'm not going to run out and do something just because you said God told me to tell you. My friends, there is only one mediator between you and God, and that's Jesus Christ. Do not allow anybody who sets himself up as uh, uh, an apostle, a prophet, or whatever it might be, Do not allow them to become a mediator between you and God. That is not God's plan for the new covenant, for the New Testament church. You develop your own relationship with God. You be led by the Holy Spirit. Yes. And remember that New Testament prophecy is never to give directions and tell you what to do with your life. It's to confirm what God has already told you he wants you to do. And that's what we see happening here in Acts chapter 13 and verse 2. Hey, I'm Eddie Hyatt. This is the Eddie Hyatt Podcast, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. God